Hey, what's up guys? My name's Josh Winiarski and I'm a photographer and filmmaker here on YouTube as well as Instagram. And today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite lenses, which is the Canon EFS 24mm. Hold up, my cat just came in my room. Oh, you can't help me. Okay, so taking a look at this lens, it is tiny. When you put this on your camera, you're not trying to impress anybody. You know, I've had this on my camera before and people have looked at me and been like, is there even a lens on that camera? And like, with a quick glance, sometimes it really looks like there isn't. You know, if you're all about that flashy gear, those red ring lenses, something big, something heavy, something that says, I'm a professional, then this isn't gonna be the lens for you, but it does pack a big punch in a tiny package. So I'm gonna give you 5 reasons why you should consider this lens, and then towards the end of the video, I'll give you a couple of downsides to it. So the first reason you should consider this lens is it's a small lens. Because it's such a small lens, it has this tiny form factor, it weighs almost nothing, and because of that, you can always just toss it in your camera bag, toss it in your pocket, put it on your camera and it won't weigh you down. And I love it for that reason. One of the things that's always really hard for me is deciding what to put in my camera bag, because I definitely can't take all the cameras I have, I definitely can't take all the lenses I have, but I never have to think twice about taking this guy. It's so tiny, sometimes I literally throw it inside the lens hood of another lens, so it's not even taking up any more space. As far as I know, this is the smallest and lightest lens Canon makes. So if you're looking for something you can just toss in a bag, toss in your pocket, you know, if you want to carry 2 lenses but not bring a bag, you can just carry this guy in your pocket and, you know, have something like a telephoto on your camera when you're walking around. Although the only problem I see with that is you can't put the telephoto in your pocket if you switch, but this lens is tiny, it's awesome, and I love it because I never have to think twice about carrying it. I mean, really, here's a 50mm lens, you know, a pretty tiny lens. Here's the 24. It's almost half the size, which brings me to my next point, which is that the 24mm is more versatile than a 50mm. Now, because this is an EFS lens, we're only going to be talking about Rebel series cameras, you know, like the 70D, the 80D, crop sensor cameras. And on a crop sensor camera, a 50mm turns into an 80mm. That's pretty zoomed in. Once you're at 80mm, it's really only good for portraits, maybe product photography, but that's a pretty long reach, and you're not going to be able to catch anything on the wide end. And it's honestly a little too far for most people's general purpose. The 24mm, on the other hand, goes to 38mm? About 38mm. And 38mm is way more versatile. It's still good for portraits, you just have to be a few feet closer, but it's wide enough you can use it for landscapes as well. And on top of that, the minimum focusing distance is so much better than the 50mm. You can actually get more close-up macro shots than you can with a 50, even though this has like half the focal range. Or excuse me, it has half the focal distance. You can't get close-ups of things far away that you can't physically get closer to, but aside from that, this is a very versatile lens. And while I continue to brag about it, let's get into point number 3, which is that this lens has an f2.8 aperture. Again, this is going to make it good for portraits, B-roll, landscapes, night photography, and even a little astrophotography. For regular use, it's fast enough to get you that blurry background if that's what you're into, but one of the things I found really cool this summer is that this is actually a pretty good entry-level astro lens. During the summer, I went on a little drive, found a bus, and used this lens to take a picture of it, and with my 80D, the 2.8 aperture was fast enough and this lens was wide enough that I could get a pretty decent shot of the Milky Way. Now, it isn't ideal. f2.8 is probably the slowest aperture you would want for astrophotography. However, it just goes back to the versatility of this lens. I mean, you're not going to be shooting wildlife with it, but it can pretty much handle almost everything else. And next we've got the icing on top, because yeah, it's 38mm, yeah, it's got a nice f2.8 aperture, but they even put an STM motor in this thing. This means that when the lens is focusing, it's going to be nearly silent. Now, this isn't a huge deal for photographers, however, that scratchy loud sound kind of sounds cheap and plasticky if you don't have an STM or USM motor, so it's nice they included that here. But the real benefit is if you're shooting video with this lens, it's going to be nearly silent, so it's not going to pick up the focusing noise while you're shooting video. Now, one thing I've noticed, and I think it's because the lens is so small, is that it's not quite as silent as some other STM lenses I've used. However, it works totally fine for video. You might be able to hear it just barely with your ear, but I've never had my microphone pick it up, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. It's a great motor. And last but not least, let's talk about price. So this lens comes in at $130, and I hate saying this, but that's pretty cheap for a lens. I know it's expensive for some people, and trust me, I totally get it, but relatively speaking, it's one of the cheaper lenses on the market. For instance, if you're using a full frame camera and you want a lens with the exact same specs, 24mm f2.8, it's gonna cost you about $550, and you lose the small form factor. Now, granted, that lens can work on APS-C and full frame cameras, while this one's only gonna work on APS-C crop sensor cameras, but that's a big price difference. And if that's too expensive, one of the things I will always recommend is buying either used or refurbished. I bought my first DSLR refurbished, I bought my first 2 lenses refurbished, and I actually bought this guy locally, used on Craigslist. The guy advertised it for $100, but I was like, hey, would you take $70? And then he's like, nah, I'll do $75, and I was like, sold. And I mean, look at this thing. It looks brand new. Like, legitimately, this lens is in better condition than some of the lenses I've bought new. AKA just one of my lenses has a little nick on the outside. But seriously, lenses are so expensive. Always consider used or refurbished if they start to push your budget a little bit. $75, I'm so glad I didn't buy it new because I got it for almost half the price. Now, while this isn't 100% a in-depth review, I'm going to give you 2 cons just so you know what you're buying if you consider this lens. So one of the biggest cons, once again, is it's not going to fit on a full frame camera. If you buy this and you upgrade to a full frame, or if you buy this and you have a full frame, it just won't work. And along with that, the absolute biggest con, the one reason you might not want this lens, is the focusing speed. It's anything but fast. Like, it does not focus very quickly at all. Now, I don't want to scare you, it'll work fine for landscapes, portraits, most things like that, but if something is moving, this is not a very quick focusing lens. But anything shy of, action sports, which this lens is not meant for anyways, it's gonna work well for. Anyways, that's it for me. Those are just 5 reasons why you might want to consider the Canon EFS 24mm lens. This is my favorite APS-C lens right now, and hopefully you can understand why. Once again, my name's Josh Winiarski. Check me out on Instagram, and if you liked the video, be sure to like it. If you have any questions, have any comments, hit up that comment section down below, and if you want to see more content like this, consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all next time.